Microservices is equal to virtualized software. So there's a big difference there. We're not virtualizing the hardware and then running the software on that virtualized hardware. We're actually virtualizing the software itself, so we can scale and elastic the software itself, if elastic is even a word. So that brings me to this. What we want is best of breed tools, not end-to-end solutions. This is something that I saw at a conference the other day. Now, it's an interesting statement because while in some ways, yeah, you do want to go out and get the best of this and the best of that and the best of that and put them together. But to say that you don't want an end-to-end solution there is you're going to end up with an end-to-end solution. You're just going to bolt together lots of different pieces of modules. But to me, it's a bit like when you buy a car. When you buy a car, you don't buy a petrol station or a petrol pump. You don't buy, well, if you have to get a new set of tyres, for instance, you can go and do that. Or you could change your tyres to a different kind of tyre if you prefer. However, what you don't do is go into the dealership with your old gearbox from your old car under your arm and ask them to bolt it into your brand new luxury car because you like it. That just doesn't really happen. The car itself is an end-to-end solution, even though there are some integrations around the car in order to power it. Hopefully electrical ones, if we want to be environmentally friendly, which of course we do. So what you end up with is a situation like this in this best of breed environment, that you have to find a best of breed for each one of these parts of the production workflow, and then you have to consolidate them together so that you can actually get them out. So the problem here is that by the statement itself is difficult because containers cannot talk to each other by default. In a microservice environment, I did this last week actually, or the week before last, these two containers can't talk to each other just because they're containers. Just because they're microservices doesn't mean they can talk to each other. There must be like APIs built between the two of them. I'm kind of going over a bit what I went over last week, but we're talking about glue. So if you have the best of breed NLCS and the best of breed graphics and the best of breed transcode and MAM here, you need two pieces of glue where the NLCS talks to the graphics and the graphics talks to the NLCS. That's two. And if you extrapolate that across, of course, you end up with this. And the question is, who's responsible for all of the glue? Who takes responsibility for that? So there's a lot of things that if something throws an error, how do we know that and how do we deal with that? So exception errors are a bit like a whodunit movie, right? So you have to go through the logs and you have to find out, in this case, the transcoder failed to register a render with the automation and that's what took the system down. It might take just a few microservices down, but fundamentally it's just a big whodunit movie. And that can be complicated to resolve when you have many different coding teams who are siloed in different companies, able to talk to each other. So it can get a bit problematic. It comes to this sort of concept of too much glue. If you have too much glue, you will increase complexity. You'll also increase the amount of SLAs, and whether you need like an SI or something like that to build all of this, or whether, we have a situation right now where people are actually starting to build like a consolidation level. And this is like a higher level of vendor lock-in. So people say, I don't want vendor lock-in. And of course, it's a perfectly valid statement. The thing is, who consolidates a best of breed solution? If we decide of all these pieces that we get it, who actually consolidates it together? And like I say, is that an SI, for instance, or is that another vendor? Who sits here in the middle and says, okay, I'll sort all this out for you? Traditionally it was green cable and routers and lots of buttons. But in this case now, if we're either in the cloud or even if we're on-prem, and these are all different manufactured code, then who consolidates that? Who's in charge? Who's responsible for that consolidation? And going back to my point earlier about when you start, a vendor consolidates or an SI, whoever consolidates in this world is going to start trying to build what we saw in the 90s with CompuServe and AOL and you know, all of these, where they had a button that would take you to the wider internet, but they tried desperately to keep you inside their little thing here. So it was very difficult to get to the internet from here. They put all of their services effectively in here. So they consolidated a lot of things. But I think, as we all remember from this, it wasn't great. It was average. So it wasn't a great experience, so to speak. And a lot of this is also very fragile. Because the way that we're building this stuff now, particularly when we're building for cloud, it's kind of never really been done before. We've been doing microservices for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years. And they've been around quite a long time. But actually bringing them to market now to do these jobs that we're trying to do means that it doesn't matter what the sticker is on the box. Fundamentally, it's untested, and we don't know how it works and if it works. So it's a bit of a level playing field across all of that. So we think it's time for a change, that we should change the way that we think about this stuff, because what's really common in this day and age, certainly I've come across it quite a lot, is that people tend to compare things together a lot. So what we need to do is try to come together and embrace change a little bit and compare less to what we used to do and reflect more on what we used to do. So instead of comparing one thing on the other, let's just say, was that really the right way to do that? Is there a better way to do that? Can we move forwards? Can we take bigger leaps forward? So it's about not being a prisoner to the past. And I'm only going to bear on this just briefly because I've done this graphic to death. But, you know, we do need to build this bridge from the past through the present and into the future together. So instead of going around in an infinite loop here, which is where we're currently stuck, we need to be much more linear about how we push forwards with technology, because technology is evolving so fast that we must keep up with it as we go, or we'll get left behind. So radical innovation can change everything. So if you remember back to when you had a tape and now every single tape you have is in your back pocket on your phone, you know, that's an interesting analogy, because, you know, this thing is a radical innovation when it came along. Even the iPod was a radical innovation, changes everything. So that change can be very, very fast, and it can be very hard for people to keep up with that change. So I always say that it's not a risk, okay? It's not a risk, it's an opportunity to buy a solution rather than a product, because we tend to productify everything. That's what I'm saying about comparing things. When we productify everything, it's not a relationship. You know, when you get into software as a service, for instance, that starts to be more about the relationship with the vendor than it is actually about what you're buying, because you rely on them to update the software as you go along and look after you as you go along. So, you know, when we start talking about modular stuff, I'm particularly talking about microservices here, but when we start to talk about modular microservices, it's a bit like playing marbles and trying to get all the marbles together, you know, and as you add more and more things, you're going to be holding all these marbles in your hands, and then they're going to start spilling out. They're going to be difficult to hold on to. Okay, so you're going to have exception errors and issues like that. So you need all the sysops and the DevOps that the whole world's looking for, the shipping companies, you know, everybody in the world's looking for sysops and DevOps, and we're all chasing after the same talent pool. And they're the ones that are going to hold all this together. Now, that's one approach, but the end-to-end microservices approach